Jay. I mean, Remsen. Remsen!
What's up with that name? Where's he from? Iceland? Sounds like an Icelandic name.
Is that racist?
No, I'm just thinking of the origin of the name. I don't know. I don't know where he's from. He's a good-looking guy. I appreciate that. We had not many conversations. We had a few conversations off air with one Christian Harloff and with Perry, both telling us how much content they're putting out and the editors are working overtime. So they've done that. So where the hell is Collider Live?
What does Remsen have that I don't? I mean, give me a break. He's probably my age. I'd like to see Remsen's resume?
The Remsen. Okay.
Oh God, what a terrible start.
Well, for one, he lives in California.
That means nothing.
2, he looks great. He looks fantastic. Great hair. 3, he has a fantastic Instagram profile. That's right. I do my homework. Looks like that thing's been curated to look amazing, which I appreciate. I don't understand how. Tell me what apps you use. That would be fantastic.
You're talking an awful lot. You're talking an awful lot about his appearance and his looks, but none of that matters because he is not an on-screen personality. He's an editor.
That we know of. You never know. They might, Jon Schnepp might leave, and they might need somebody to do a show.
You know who's standing in Remsen's way?
Who's that?
Dorian. You know why?
Why?
Because Dorian gets to do everything, and it's awesome. Like, I think Dorian secretly has the best job at Collider because he has all of the advantages, all the perks. He gets to go to these big screenings, the smaller screenings, but he just kind of seems to be everywhere at once. Like, it's crazy how he just fit in immediately, and he's everywhere. And what a great guy. That's what Collider has going for it. I know that they hired Snyder. We're going to talk about Snyder's first week at Collider here, but
and Remsen.
I like that they're hiring young because these old guys, they're tired.
Well, you're confused though, because you said, I mean, no offense, but you said hire young and you said Remsen and Jeff Sneider. That's not a shot to Snyder. Just, Snyder's more of like, he's a little bit of the old guard, right?
I made a distinction between the two, not saying that they were the same.
Did you have any idea that Jeff Sneider was 34 years old?
No. Thanks for checking out Collider Afterthoughts, the show that examines the content and fandom at Collider. My name is Ryan Snelling, Jaye Williams. What's happening?
That's me. Another week in the Collider world. A weird week, a little bit of a strange week, because listen, all these movies, these big tentpole movies, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are out of the way. I thought, we were going to get a nice casual
We're just
coasting.
getting started. We got Jurassic World. We've got Ocean's 8, which, by the way, marketing been entirely absent from my life, and I'm a big fan of that franchise. Ocean's 8. There's a few movies coming out this weekend, as a matter of fact. They're not big necessarily, but like all three of them I'm interested in. We're just getting started here, Jay.
Yeah, I guess so, but we have so much stuff to talk about that has nothing really to do with movies. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of moves being made in the Collider world that I just frankly didn't expect to be made. We're made aware of some things that go on, but we're mostly made aware of nothing that goes on. So to get some of these little bits and pieces being moved, I have no idea who's going to be on one-on-one from week to week. And I feel like Christian Harloff has informed me of at least 87 people that are going to be on the show. He might have recorded 88 of those, and I haven't seen any of them. I found out Dominic Monaghan is going to be on the show now, and I thought, like, aren't we still waiting for, like, somebody from the NWA movie, Straight Outta Compton, or have we had that?
Jason Mitchell, he hasn't been on yet. They recorded it, but they haven't released it yet. So I don't know if Jason Mitchell has a movie coming out later this year. I think that he does. So maybe that's going to be timed.
Are people getting bumped from the one-on-one schedule? Like, did he say, listen, I don't know when this Dominic Monaghan episode is going to come out. And that's fine. It's not like I need to know that specifically. Like, just getting the behind-the-scenes Instagram story was enough for me to get excited. People should know that we're massive fans of Lost, which is, without a doubt, the most important thing he's ever done in his acting career. I just don't know what to expect.
I'm kind of not excited about that episode, only because...
Why?
It's going to be the one time. It's going to be the one time where Christian isn't... I'm such a fan of Lost. I know that I'm just going to... And I'm not saying it's righteous. I'm not saying I'm justified. I'm going to be backseat driving that interview, if you will. So that's one thing that this one doesn't have going for it, as opposed to all of the other ones, which have been fantastic. One-on-one is... great. It's its own thing. It's special. It's particular, and I appreciate it. You got to fix the YouTube playlist because it's all out of order. Change it to date published. That way, the latest episode, because Sinead is still like the number 3 show, and that happened a while back. Fix the YouTube playlist, but other than that, one-on-one it's firing on all cylinders here.
Well, to be fair to one-on-one and what we would, I think. And I get this because I can be like this too. We think about what we come to expect from interview style shows like this, especially with actors. And, you know, one of the things that I appreciate about Christian and his hosting abilities is that he can often take the conversation into a place that's unexpected. And I think that's what makes great interviewers, like knowing some areas, you know, maybe it is time for Dominic Monaghan to talk about Lost. I'm sure for a long time that's all he talked about, and he's over talking about it. Maybe he's going to promote something specifically. I've heard Dominic Monaghan speak on Joe Rogan's podcast multiple times. I think he's even been on Fighter and the Kid, if I'm not mistaken. But I have no doubt in my mind that Christian will be able to find a different and fresh approach and angle that I'm not thinking of, and I'm eager to listen to it. So
I need to let our audience know that Jay and we're recording this on a Wednesday evening. We typically record on Thursday evening. So we cannot talk about Jedi Council. We can't talk about anything that takes place on Thursday. We're also not going to be able to talk about the very first episode of Movie Review Talk, which will have aired the Friday that this goes out. So just remember, we're coming from a place. It's Wednesday, June 6th to us. To you, it is June 8th, 9th, 10th. Whenever you listen to this show on the Movie Talk podcast feed or SK Plus YouTube channel, which it came back last week, even though I don't think people realize it doesn't technically belong there. I'm not saying that in opposition. I'm just saying people act like they have no idea that it's a Collider show, at least in the sense that it's under the podcast network umbrella, because they just think 3 episodes don't exist. You should definitely check out the podcast network because there's a lot of stuff going on there. Movie Talk is its own feed, Heroes, Jedi Council. So if you're listening to this on SK Plus, even though it's a small portion of our audience, this is a Collider Movie Talk podcast feed show. So that's there for you, and we're not the only thing there, of course. All kinds of things going on, including one-on-one. I do want to talk about something that happened last week. I actually think I meant to bring it up on last week's show. I think it's that old, but I think it's worth talking about here. Because, you know, we're content creators, so we have Sight and Sound going on right now. By the way, Ken Knapsack stopped by Sight and Sound to give me his movie bucket list, so definitely check that out. Link in the description. Jay, you and I do Sight and Sound, and I'm not going to speak for you. I think our dreams and aspirations are similar, but they're not quite in line with each other. I'm here because I saw what the Schmoes were doing one day on YouTube and thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm good at. And I've been building my career ever since. And I've always had dreams and aspirations to go out to LA and join these people and be a different type of persona, because the persona that I want to be in this community, I'm not seeing right now, and I think it could be interesting. Joelle Monique, a friend to the show, a friend of ours, put out some tweets, and I've seen Jay Washington speak vocally about this too, and I appreciate the transparency, because that's what we're all about here as well. But they've shed a light on some things that we're not, at least I'm not totally used to, Jay. And I thought that we could talk about it. Joelle was tweeting, and I'll just paraphrase since I don't have the tweets in front of me, but she expressed some worry. She said that this space, it's not made of money, and she doesn't know how she's going to pay her bills. And it sort of broke my heart, because I'm such a fan of Joelle, and I see Joelle hustling and grinding. And this conversation isn't just about Joelle, because I think she represents a lot of people that have these same goals and same aspirations. So I just wanted your take on these tweets. I don't know if they're still up, but she talked about quitting her job, and it was just kind of heartbreaking, and it's not something that we're totally used to when we talk about, especially when we're talking about Collider on here.
Well, I think one of the reasons it's so applicable to this show and just this conversation in general, I can relate it to Collider in the sense that Collider has been in places like Screen Junkies and Hyper RPG channels that exist, these sort of houses, networks that exist on YouTube for this space. They've been known for housing and providing a lot of work to a lot of freelance individuals, and they still do. I'm not saying that they don't, but it's become a little bit more few and far between as of late, in terms of relying more on people that actually work inside of the buildings. And speaking specifically to Collider, that's the case. And we've often said, do more with less. And honestly, that is, even though it's a harsh reality and it's a harsh truth, that's an example of doing that. Collider, more so than any other network, even though it might be one of the ones that's thriving more so, and I'm not specifically comparing numbers, I'm just saying in terms of the output, when I say, I would use the word innovation, but I don't mean innovation in terms of creating things that are fresh, just how prolific the network is. I would put them on a higher tier than other individuals in the space, but they're the most rogue. They're the most punk rock, as we've said. They don't have a corporate backer. They don't have that safety net. All that was pulled out once Complex left the network. So I understand the decision to move away from using a lot of freelance work. Use what you have in-house. However, this is, like you said, the transparency is there for anybody that does have similar dreams and aspirations to be personalities in this space. And it's also very comforting to have that quote-unquote safety net of working for a company. I can show up to work every single day. I can get the salary. I can get the wage. However, this is also a very bloated space. There are a lot of people doing the same thing. There are a lot of people putting out the same types of content. That's not a critical commentary. It's just a state of what's going on. However, it has never been easier to work for yourself. It has never been easier to build your own personal brand. It has never been easier to create your own path and do whatever you need to do. And that's where you and I differ slightly, where, you can't just rely on a big daddy. You can't just rely on a company like Collider or Screen Junkies or whatever to just constantly give you that paycheck. You have to be building your own brand on top of that. I'm not throwing any shade or anything like that. Obviously, he's a friend of ours and a friend of the things that we do. But somebody like Ken Knapsack, I feel like, has just now, since leaving Collider, really, really infused a lot of energy into building his own personal brand. But it wasn't until he left Collider that it seemed like he was doing that. Yes, he was here and he was there at different channels. But I think it's more important. It's more important today than it ever has been to make sure that you are focusing on building your own personal brand to just get as successful as you possibly can.
Right. And that's something that we've hinted at those discussions as well over the past couple of weeks. Like I was frustrated with Makuga because he can literally do everything that he wants. at his own apartment at the Josh McCouga show set. Like, okay, just talk about TV there. Start a podcast. Stop complaining. We were frustrated with that. He can do that at any point. We'll see if he does it. Someone like Jay Washington did start his own YouTube channel, so I see him doing that. Jay is always hustling, always grinding. That goes back to the question I asked Perry when Perry came on the show. It was a different conversation, but I talked about using your popularity, using your personality, the followers, literally the followers that you've accrued on Twitter. Use your audience as leverage, as a platform to get going in the actual industry, the filmmaking industry. I asked if that was something that she was actively working on. It's like, at any point, Joelle or whoever it is, they can use the followers that they've accrued, and they've already got things in motion. Like, now's the time to start your YouTube channel, and you can actually get a decent following. And that's the thing that you can be promoting. Like, as opposed to going on Hyper RPG and then promoting that you're on AfterBuzz, why don't you promote your YouTube channel? And so that's one of the things that I like about, what you and I do. Our identity isn't just the after show guys, even though some people think that Jay and I are just the after show guys. They don't think that we can talk about pop culture the exact same way that all of these other... Actually, that's not fair, because I don't think we do it the same way, thankfully. But
we're capable of having these conversations.
Some people have no idea what Jay and I are capable of, because we're just doing a Collider after show, and maybe we've put ourselves in a corner. But I like that our identity isn't entirely tied to Collider Afterthoughts, because we are actively building all of this other stuff and laying groundwork and laying foundation. So it sucks, because it's heartbreaking for me, because again, I'm the guy that's like, I want to be in LA, I want to be a part of this, and you're the one that asks me why. It's heartbreaking for me to see someone like Joelle struggle through this, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that these people can do to actively help themselves in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, listen, I think Mark and Christian, we've spoken about this a lot before. Hats off to them. Throughout their entire career, they essentially built their brand alongside this idea of giving other people a platform. They've brought other people on and said, be a personality here, we'll help support you. The same thing that we're doing right now, but people have to take advantage of that, right? They have to take, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean, they need to take advantage of that opportunity and use accruing people who are falling in love with your personality and build something else alongside it. And we've seen it with our own eyes. We saw them let JT, not let him go, but we saw them see JT off to Screen Junkies and Ken in the same way. Like, they're more than happy to do that for people. But you can only bring people to the well so long before it runs dry, right? And it just seems like now more than ever that there's just not as much opportunity for the freelancing community. To speak on what we talked about a little bit off air, but to speak to what you're bringing up now about the whole thing of being in LA has its advantages, right? It has its advantages to creating movie and entertainment content, because you have a lot of opportunities for interviews and this and that. You look at somebody like Miss Movies, who's been able to have all of the people in this space on her shows, and that's great. That's fantastic. But if it comes to pinching pennies and this and that in order to fulfill a dream and whatever the case may be, if your dream is to be a pundit and to speak about these things and cover it, you don't have to be in LA to do that. You can be anywhere on this earth and still cover it in pretty much the same capacity. You can get on Skype for these interviews. You can get on other apps and this and that, and use it to your advantage. So again, more tools than ever in order to do what you love to do. That's, not trying to simplify it or put off anything that any of these individuals are saying. They have the right to vent and air out their frustrations. I get it. I'm there with you. We're a part of the grind club too. So, if anybody out there that's listening to this is a part of that club too, don't hesitate to reach out. We can work together as a community and help one another.
I just wanted to use that discussion to get Frank Lucatuardo to start a podcast. That was the entire goal, is to inspire him, start his own YouTube channel, start his own podcast, because I think it could be weird, it could be insane, and I would definitely be a guest. So there's that.
Well, and one thing that we've talked about too, that I always find interesting to have these conversations, is that just because people are out there with a hustle mentality doesn't necessarily mean that they want to do what we're doing. They don't necessarily want to be on-air personalities. Our conversation with Beardo wasn't this crazy mind-blowing thing that I just didn't realize that wasn't something that he wanted to do. It was just interesting, the fact that he had a podcast that was successful, but out of his mouth, he wanted to be more behind the scenes. And that's fine too. There are plenty of opportunities. And in that regard, being in LA is advantageous, right? If you want to be behind the scenes working on creative endeavors and this and that, then being in a place that is like nurturing of that is the best place to be. So in that regard, absolutely. And somebody like Frank, if he wants to just edit until his fingers fall off, then that's the place to be for him. And he seems more than capable to do so.
Man, I really wish that there was zero elaboration to that point. I wish you would have just said, yeah, we had Beardo on the show and it wasn't some crazy mind-blowing thing.
Yeah, well, anyway, so Frank is one of my favorite people on this planet Earth. Not only does he listen to Afterthoughts, not only is it his favorite podcast because it's his only podcast. Not true, though, because now he listens to Sight and Sound, which I'm very appreciative of. He also is cutting up little bits and pieces of the show and sending it to us to distribute on social media.
Yeah.
Is this something that they should be doing anyways, though? That's my question. Should they be chopping up our sound bites and promoting them on social media? Ryan Snelling, your thoughts?
See, I think that's one way we have inspired Frank, and he's ahead of the curve on some of this stuff. Like, that's the whole point of this podcast.
I can just imagine him walking up to Christian, hey, man, so the guys on Afterthoughts had this great idea. Get away from me, I'm hungry. And he's just like... No time for this.
The guys on Afterthoughts had a good idea. I think they're dopey.
In a month, guys, we have this great new initiative. It's called Share the Podcast Feed. What we're doing now is we're cutting up clips from the podcast, and what we want you to do is share them. You can win Omaha Steaks gift card.
But Christian, shouldn't we fix the podcast descriptions first? No. We're starting a shareability initiative. Okay, very good. So anyway, I want Frank to come on our show because we love you.
He's the next guest. We need him on the show, and then after that, I might be setting something up. But you know who I want on this show? You know who I want to talk to?
Mark Fernandez.
I would love that, but he wasn't my pick right now. I want Jeff Sneider on this show. I want to talk to Jeff Sneider. I want to talk to him about his role in the company. I want to talk to him about movie journalism in general and the threat that the internet poses on that, and the threat that this dog-eat-dog community in general poses on it, and what he thinks he can bring to the table that's different that Collider has already established. I think we've seen that a little bit this week. I don't know where Jeff Sneider is on the rundown, so I'm going to stop giving fake takes, and I'm going to let you go ahead and run the show.
Yeah, so let's talk about Jeff Sneider because
sounds good.
Let's have the opposite conversation that we just had about Joel, because we're gonna move on from the heartbreaking stuff, and now we're gonna talk about the reality of Collider is just
flourishing.
It's absorbing the titans in this space, like Jeff Sneider, Scott Mantz doing movie. I mean, we talked about how excited we were about all of this stuff. There were some concerns, and we will talk about last week's concerns as well. But I don't think we stressed the point that Collider just brought in those two people, where like those two people, they're massive individuals on their own. They're massive figures in this space, and it's crazy to think that they're all coming under one house. Like, the only person that Collider needs to hire that hasn't been hired yet is JTE, because that just seems to make the most sense, because people are just they're attracted to Collider right now. It's crazy. It's crazy to me that all of these Titans, people that I grew up loving, and not just, Jeff Sneider wasn't a part of Collider for a while, and Scott Mintz he was with Access Hollywood, but they were still my favorite personalities. So to see them all come together in one place is fantastic. Again, we can't talk about movie review talk yet. Do we have anything new about movie review talk to talk about other than just to talk about how excited we are about it?
Not in particular. We got confirmation of something today on Movie Talk that we were privy to. We couldn't really bring up last week, or maybe we did. I don't remember. That it is going to be taking the place of Friday's movie talk. Movie Talk scaling back a little bit. We'll talk more about that when we get into Movie Talk stuff. But it will be replacing the Friday's Movie Talk, and that will be your show on Friday.
We don't have any confirmations. Ellis just said changes are happening with Movie Talk. They didn't say what they were, so there's that. So very good, Jay.
No, they for sure did bring up the fact that it's replacing it on Friday. That's like the thing he mentioned.
That's not what I'm addressing. The statement that you made, but it's.
Oh yeah, well,
okay.
We'll talk about that.
So anyway, Jeff Sneider. He came out with a bang here. So we saw exactly what this looked like. He broke a scoop the minute he stepped foot in that building, and him and Perry were already recording videos at like their 5 or 6 a.m., however early it was. And right from the get-go, they were breaking scoops. They the one guy's in John Wick 3, and then they broke the Willy Wonka scoop. So we saw what that would look like, which was sort of the most obvious. Like, that's sort of what we could have come up with, right? Like, Jeff is just going to use his skill set to break Collider news videos. That's sort of the most obvious, which isn't a bad thing. It happened exactly how it should have, I guess, the way that we could have imagined it, and it's pretty cool and exciting. It's weird to say. I don't know how to explain it. It's weird feeling like, oh, I'm really excited by Collider news, but I am, especially if it puts Collider video on the map more so. So I thought it was cool to see them doing that, and I thought overall, Jeff Sneider did a great job in his first week at the desk. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, the hire in general, for the sole fact that he's so multifaceted, and I think we saw that more than ever this week. I think he could have just as easily sufficed as an individual who had a lot of sources, who could break a lot of news, and he sort of addressed what capacity his role was with Collider by stating that he was obviously going to be supporting some stuff on the .com side, but his main focus was to break news on video and be the news guy there. But where you get this wild card vibe and idea with Jeff Sneider is the fact that he is more than capable of being an on-screen presence, and not just with breaking news, but also being in some really, really interesting conversations. One of the things that I value the most, especially now in its current era and form of movie talk, is some of the nitty-gritty inside baseball business aspects of the film industry. I love, even though I don't think opening weekend box office numbers are a huge deal to really focus on, I think to hear him talk about numbers and the likelihood of certain things and just come at it from a completely different perspective, having the inside knowledge that he has, is fantastic. To hear somebody talk about stuff like that on Movie Talk. The other thing that I think he brings to the table that is very, very important is the fact that he comes from a background and a fandom of movies that isn't so reliant on tentpole franchises. He goes a little bit against the grain, something that you and I very much appreciate, separating the fandom community from just his opinion of overall film. I think he wears that on his sleeve, which is not to say that anybody that's been on Collider sort of over-exaggerates their fandom. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think he just is very honest and passionate about his perspective of film that feels different from what we've constantly had. Was that something that you picked up on throughout this week?
Definitely. I agree with you, but I was going to bring up something. I was going to bring up an example of something that's sort of the opposite of that. But I did something really fun this week. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Around the Horn on ESPN, but it's essentially a sports show.
Why hasn't Collider copied that? Collider needs to copy that immediately.
It's a sports show where journalists give their takes on sports news, and they're just awarded points, and people win and lose and blah, 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 blah. So I was doing that on Movie Talk this week, and it's been pretty fun because we've had some just a few people that watch Movie Talk. I got to play this game with them, and so we were awarding points and taking away points, and I started doing it on Jeff Sneider's first episode with Roca because for several reasons you and I were excited to see Snyder go up against Roca because for one, Roca on his own has sort of been a little contrarian. He's been over the top lately, like to the point where we're wondering, is this a character on Movie Talk? And we have really appreciated his dynamic, especially with Perry, because they've been going back and forth, and they've been really entertaining episodes. So when you factor that into everything going on with the Schmoedown and the eventual basketball game, I wanted to see Roca and Snyder go head to head. It didn't exactly happen the way that I had imagined, but it was fun awarding points and taking away points. Jeff Sneider, and I'm saying this entirely out of love, he had a bit of a dong take, though, Jay. And I'm saying this, there's 2 points I want to make here. Is for one, I was surprised because when you see someone on camera at Collider, you assume that they know literally everything. That doesn't mean they have to know everything, especially if you're in the scoop business. If you're in the press business, I assume that they know everything, they see everything that comes out. So there was a little bit of shock factor to this, but the fact that Jeff Sneider had never seen any of the Lego movies, he had a bit of a dong take. And Jay, for our Afterthoughts listeners who don't know what a dong take is, could you please explain that for them?
Yeah, yeah. For those that don't know, if you're not a listener of Sight and Sound, one of our frequent use terms is the term of being a dong. Someone can be a dong. My least favorite people, I think, on the face of planet Earth are the individuals who have an opinion of something, who only have that opinion based on ancillary information, and they've never actually taken in the content in order to give an opinion based on it. I have no problem if somebody doesn't like something, but I need to know why you don't like something. And if you can't cite that thing specifically with factual information as to why you don't like it, then you're just giving a dong take. If you saw a trailer and you said that movie is trash, you can say it looks like trash, but you can't say it is trash because you haven't seen the movie. When I talk to my friends about Star Wars and they say, or no, I'll give a better example. Comic book movies. I know so many people who say, I don't watch that comic book movie trash. And I say, have you watched any of them, period? Well, no, but they just look stupid. That's a dong take.
And the fact that they're actually all different depending on the movie, but they still use it as a blanket term, comic book movies. They already make that judgment without knowing. And Snyder had a little bit of that with the Lego movie. I'm
going to go a little against you for a second. You said it off air. Just wait. I was so ready to praise this man for his appearance and all his appearance on the show.
It was a good appearance.
And then come in just red hot, molten lava fire, and just absolutely rip him for this take because I'm so against this ideology, this presence of giving these dongish, this dongish lifestyle that these people live. However, he sort of explained it a little bit more, and I actually thought he had an honest approach. At first, it was a dong take, but he sort of backed off of it a little bit and explained that something that I not only appreciate, but I can relate to, that this man takes in a lot of content. I listen to a lot of music. I'm supposed to be the music guy, but I will fully admit there is no way in hell I can take in everything. And at some point, some people have to be cut from the team. Like, I just don't have time for everything, and I appreciate that. His initial take was a dong take, but I like that he backed up on it and sort of explained himself a little bit.
No, the part that actually made me turn my head a little bit is that he had this entire thing on the Lego movie. Why the fact that it was just uninteresting to him, he didn't care about it. He thought it looked bad. He did all of that with the Lego movie franchise as a whole. And then when it came to talking about the Wreck-It Ralph 2 trailer, without missing a beat, he was like, love the first movie. This trailer looks great. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? It's the same.
Yeah, why is one this and the other that? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's so weird that he was so on board with the Wreck-It Ralph and so dismissive of like a movie because of the type of animation. But anyway, we're just having fun. Not really a big deal. Overall, the appearance was great, and I was worried. Like last week I talked about, I was a little concerned. I didn't want Snyder to I didn't want him, and I didn't know that he was going to do this. I was just concerned that he would come in with this overly serious dynamic. I don't want Snyder to take himself seriously. I want him to be proud of his job and his connections and everything that he's built for himself, obviously. But I would love to see him not take it so serious, and that didn't seem to be an issue. That didn't seem to be something that I should have been worried about, because he had great dynamic at the table. He brought in fresh perspective. He gave us. It's not like Schnepp, whereas like Schnepp, quote unquote, provides information. It's not like that. Snyder actually provides information at the table, so I did get a lot of value. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the changes are for Movie Talk in the coming weeks, but I can't wait to see Snyder be on the show more.
I have a request to anybody that out in Burbank that's listening to this. So listen, Christian can have his fun being the matchmaker on the Schmoedown, and that's all well and good. The Schmoedown has been fantastic lately. I want to be matchmaker for some heated debates on Movie Talk. Not necessarily like a topic of conversation, but listen, we thought that the Roca Snyder, I almost called him Schneider, I don't know why. The Roca Snyder head-to-head was top billing, of course. It was something we wanted to see. Roca surprised me because I think on Movie Talk, on most Collider stuff, he plays things pretty professionally. Like, he rarely like just goes off the rails and just starts, you know, Christian can just be like, I don't even care about structure right now. I'm so upset about the, you know, whatever, Jared Leto being the Joker. I want to see Christian and Jeff Sneider on the same panel together, and I would love for them to go head to head in a debate. I think they're two similar personalities when it comes to being a little bit heated about certain topics. And I think it would be a lot of fun, especially for Mark to try to reel them both in. Christian
today on Movie Talk was fire.
That's actually what prompted this whole thing.
I was so giddy watching. Christian had another one of these episodes not too long ago, and we talked about it. I don't know if we talked about it here, but we definitely talked about it on Sight and Sound. Christian today on Movie Talk. So again, Wednesday's Movie Talk. Did somebody pose the question on Twitter, what's a hot take? No, I'm sorry. It was because they were reacting to the Mortal Engines trailer. And Christian brought up the fact that other than Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson is a name that doesn't actually do anything to excite anybody. Or at least that's his take. And that's something that I could not agree with more. And you don't get, how would you even describe that moment? It's just one of those times where the pundit is actually speaking your truth, your language, your opinion, and it's something really satisfying because it's not necessarily something like, you just don't always get that type of take, because again, you're talking about the Mortal Engines trailer, and once you start to talk about Peter Jackson and how he's viewed in Hollywood, I don't know, I just think it becomes a different kind of conversation, and we don't always get that extra bit at the end. And so couple that with the idea that he was speaking my truth, he was speaking my language. The episode I referred to a few weeks or months back was he had the same viewpoint on Joss Whedon. It's like, other than TV, I don't really get what Joss Whedon has done for anybody. Like, and that's something I've thought a lot about over the years. So Christian was spitting fire today, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an example of something we talk a lot about on the show. It's just, I think there's this weird film that's, not film like movies, but like a gooey, gross film that's sort of covers over this whole space. There's like this mythos with certain things that are brought up, like the name Peter Jackson, of course, he's celebrated and this and that for what he's done with one thing, and that's just the take that exists. So it's sort of one of those statements that just breaks through. It breaks through that film, and it's like, no, he really hadn't done anything. Like it's that same premise. It's that same idea of like, I don't know. Throw out anything. You could say something about Star Wars, like the Harry Potter franchise, kind of a better quality franchise. Like it's just like it's something that breaks through, and I'm glad that they have conversations like that because I get sick and tired of, if you believe it, it's fine. But I get sick and tired of having the same conversations over and over and over again. That's not just aimed at Collider. That's across everything. And it's good. I think it's really, really good to bring stuff like that up. And I'm glad that he was so poignant in making that point.
I brought it up a couple of weeks ago. I don't. They can't always help it, but I don't like the episodes of Movie Talk when all of the topics, like all of the takes, are just reduced to, I think it could be good, but there's just not a whole lot more to say about that kind of stuff. So when you get that extra, like, you don't always get I'm trying to figure out how I want to express this. Like, just their individual viewpoints on movies in general. You know what I mean? Like, they're just mostly objective about a lot of it, and I appreciate it. I'm not saying I'm just appreciating all of those extra nuggets where they're actually able to insert some of those takes. Because, like what I said earlier about how if I was ever on Movie Talk, I think that it would be different. Or if you were on Movie Talk, it would feel entirely different than the Movie Talk table that we get from day to day. And right. Like that feels like something that I would have said. Like, what has Peter Jackson done other than Lord of the Rings? I really would have begged that question. Like, I like 3 of his movies. That nothing else that he does excites me. And you just don't always get that type of language on Movie Talk because, again, so much of it is just reduced to, I think it could be good, or we'll just wait and see how it goes. Well, I think it just depends on it just depends on the topic, I guess.
I think it's more of a commentary to less being more on Movie Talk, and what I mean by that is less coverage sort of spins off into better conversation. Like, obviously, the 3-person table allows time for more of the individuals to communicate, to get their points across. And then I think if you have less topics to actually cover, and yeah, I get it. Sometimes you have to cover more, like with all these trailers dropping, you have to cover more stuff, but less topics allows you to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. There's levels to this game. Like if you have 50 trailers to talk about, you might just have like I liked it or I don't, or buy or sell. Right. Whereas if you have 3 topics, you may be able to spend a little bit more time breaking down each one.
There are changes coming to Movie Talk. As we said, Ellis mentioned it in today's episode. I don't know exactly what they're going to be yet, but I think it might be time. And they've obviously figured it out, but I guess it is time that Movie Talk gets a bit of a shakeup. I know it's disappointing to say that because we did just get this brand new graphics package a few months ago. Ellis has really brought his A game. Ellis did exactly what we all thought he was going to do, which is take that show, make it his own, and do a hell of a job at hosting it, which he does. But the numbers aren't there. They're not as strong as they used to be, I'll say. So we had a friend of ours that operates entirely outside of this bubble. He asked us, like, hey, what's the best show on Collider? How do I get started watching Collider? And I think you and we brought it down to, it just depends on what you're looking for. I mean, it depends on if you want to watch a Star Wars show, or it depends on if you want to watch a broad movie talk show. I mean, it just kind of depends. But he asked if Movie Talk was their biggest show. And it was weird for me to say no. As a matter of fact, my answer was Schmoedown, Heroes, and Jedi Council are all bigger. Granted, I think that there are different factors. Heroes isn't daily. But I guess I was just sort of comparing it to the fact that I think less people watch Movie Talk than probably a year ago. And of course, there's peaks and valleys, right? Like, even if you look on the channel right now, there's one episode that will do like 35K, and then the next one will do 65K. There's peaks and valleys, but overall, they're not as consistent, highly consistent as they used to be. So, with that being said, and you can share what you think about that, but I do, for that reason, I am encouraged that there seems to be some kind of shakeup, and we might get a bit of a jolt of fresh energy with what Movie Talk is on the channel.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't even think it has so much to do with like having inside knowledge or anything like that. I think if you just look at what Collider's got going on right now, it makes a lot of sense to me that after the split from Complex, things were going to change. After the move, things were going to change. We had this very, very important period where we needed to hit Avengers Infinity War, Deadpool, Solo. We've talked about that a lot. That they sort of just needed to play it straight, just do the coverage, get the subscribers. They did that. No big deal. Coming off of this, things are a little bit more spread out, a little bit more scattered, so you have time to sort of mess around with things. And I think we're seeing that. I think we're seeing things change with the addition of new employees, with the addition of new shows, with movie review talk, spoiler talk as well. I think it's all interesting. When I would still, regardless of numbers, Movie Talk is, in my opinion, the flagship show of Collider. And I think the reason that is,
without a doubt,
you have to look at what these different shows do outside of just numbers, but just what role they play. For me, Movie Talk is the go-to daily show that's always there for your movie fix should you need it. It's also the place you go. One of the things about going to Collider, you can't just go to Collider to be your movie place, right? There are many places out there to be your movie place. You have to go there and find something about that place that you like over other things. And I think just going to a Jedi Council for your Star Wars news is fine, but you're going to enjoy it more, at least I did when I started getting into Collider stuff, if you're more familiar with the personalities and you know what they bring to the table. The excitement that a Ken Knapsack brings, or the excitement that a Jon Schnepp brings anytime he pops up. Movie Talk is a great avenue to build those personalities. I started watching like Schmoedown stuff, and I took in Heroes and Jedi Council and the Movie Talk. I was just like, sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But the more I was interested in these individual personalities, the Marks, the Christians, the Schnepps, the Rokas, etc., the Perrys, I started to watch it every single day just because I was interested in seeing what these people had to say. So I think focusing on that is important. And we also have to bring up the fact that this is also a podcast now. I'm sure those podcast numbers did take away from some of the viewing, which is totally fine. We're not privy to that information in front of our face all the time. But yeah, all worthy talking points.
Yeah, I mean, is it their biggest show? No, but I would still call it home plate. And I do think that it does serve as an entry point for the channel. There's no question about it. I call it home plate, but and it's the show that sort of lives and breathes. It's the most topical and timely of all of the talk shows. Whereas sometimes Christian doesn't get to a Star Wars story on Jedi Council until a week late, because something might happen to drop on a Thursday after they've already taped. So it takes them a little bit longer. So in that sense, I mean, I'm not saying anything disparaging about Movie Talk. I just think, I guess what I'm saying is, there's probably a voice. There's probably a group of people that are like wondering why the hell they would sort of give it this extra jolt. But again, I don't think it's anything to freak out about. I'm just encouraged by it because I think there's other exciting things that you can do with Movie Talk and make it a more successful show. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm curious to see what goes on. Movie Review Talk is going to take over for the Friday spot as well. I'm still not entirely sure of what's going on with the movie reviews because they did Perry did a Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom review, and this is I'm sure most people watched this video and didn't think anything of it, but this video meant the world to me. And I'll tell you why, Jay. And I texted you the second that this video went up. I watched that video, and what I saw, the impression that I got was that Perry turned on a camera, sat down, and just made a YouTube video. And that's something that we've talked, and I don't know if that's the actual truth, but that's what it felt like to me. It felt like Collider could make a dozen of these a day. That might be stretching it. But you and I have talked a lot lately about doing more with less, like allowing yourself in the workflow to be able to, on a whim, just make a YouTube video, right? Like, I know that sounds weird, but it's like, we talk all the time. Christian says he doesn't want to look like a YouTube channel, but sometimes if you have the YouTube channel mindset, you can probably get some more things done. And I don't know. I know it's weird to say, and I don't know if you got the same vibe, but it just felt like Perry made a YouTube video for her YouTube channel, except it was on Collider. It wasn't overly produced. The camera was just on her. She gave her take, and it was raw. And it just, I was smiling ear to ear because I was like, yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad that they were able to put something like that together. Did I read way too much into that video, or did you pick up on some of that stuff?
No, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, I think of all the people that we know of, Perry's more than capable of doing some of this stuff on her own because she does run her own YouTube channel. Fortunately for her, she has individuals there that can help with certain aspects. Like, I'm sure she could have just handed the video where maybe at home she edits her video. She could have just handed it off to one of the editors to maybe take care of it. It was short. It was sweet. It wasn't a 30-minute multi-camera angle, throw up a bunch of graphics. I mean, there were graphics in there. It wasn't one of those things. When I first saw it and I watched it, I actually didn't think much of it specifically because, one, I realized that they needed to be quick on this Jurassic World thing because Jurassic World is such a big movie. It's a tentpole blockbuster. But also because watching it was incredibly seamless. I didn't think anything of it because it didn't feel that different than anything that I've ever seen before. One, because that's how most YouTube videos look, and and two, it just worked. But then once you said something to me, and once you did bring it up, it did start to click. It did start to resonate with me. Yeah, that's something that we've been saying a lot, and it's something that we spoke about last week, where the Collider. The Collider solo review, I don't think serviced Collider in the way that it probably should have because it was a longer, quote unquote, longer form. Anything over, I would say 12 to 15 minutes is what I would personally consider a longer form YouTube video. There are obviously they go well over that. They go into the 30 minutes to an hour sometimes, but I don't think it serviced Collider because it was so deep dive discussion on it. It would have worked better somewhere else. I think a more quick, 7 to 8 minute video review on Solo would have serviced the channel a little bit more, would have serviced shareability a little bit more. And this is the type of stuff that I like to see. I don't know if anybody could have done this or pulled this off, but it seems very feasible. It seems like they turned it around pretty quick, and this is what I want to see more of. And
it's the anti-caption this. It's the anti-now, later, or never. You know what I mean? It was just in those two shows, as far as I know, they bit the dust. And while I'm not saying those were terrible ideas, I am encouraged by the move. And you and I can make all the jokes. Like, yeah, I mean, it just feels like movie reviews on the Collider video lately. They're just like on a whim things. There's no organization to what it's actually called or who's doing it, or like at least that's not concrete to me. But overall, though, the idea that they could do a video like that, I thought it was pretty cool. So,
well, we also have to point out too that, especially on these franchise types of movies like this, I'm sure we're going to get a spoiler talk on it. So there is an avenue for a longer form discussion.
Sure.
And I'm sure Mance is going to bring it up too, right? That's another thing I want to point out there. I don't follow like the release dates and some of this stuff as closely as you do and as closely as other people do. But like, for instance, I didn't even know that Ocean's 8 was coming out. I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know it was going to be like we would get to see a review from this week. Saw the Schmoes review of it. I was surprised that we didn't get anything from Collider on it, and then I thought about it that's probably something they're going to talk about on Movie Review Talk, but I don't necessarily, and obviously people will have known because they would have seen it by now, but by the time they hear this, but I would hope that just because Mance is going to talk about it for even one of these smaller ones, that's not something that they still put out as quick as possible. I think it makes a lot of sense, numbers wise, to go ahead and do something like that, even though it might not have the pop of a Star Wars or a Marvel or a Jurassic World. I think it's still incredibly necessary. And listen, I still want to tune in to what Mance has to say. He's one of the most integral movie reviewers in the space. Like, I would have watched 100 reviews for Solo, and I'm still curious to see what he has to say about it.
What do you think the play is when for example, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, it premieres on the June 22nd, but it's been released to the press already. There's a Rotten Tomatoes score. So what's the play when it comes to movie review talk? Are they going to talk about Jurassic World Fallen? Are they going to mention Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom this week, or do they wait for it until it's more timely? You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know personally. Obviously, I don't know because I haven't seen the show. But if it were me, it seems like that would be a fantastic show to service super casual fans. Like there are people that watch Collider that think that they have to go and see every single movie that comes out on Thursday night. They have to see that movie, and they have to see it on Friday, like before something like a Movie Review Talk would come out. But I think it would be a great show to service specifically what's coming out this week, specifically what's on VOD, specifically what's out to rent, all of that stuff. I want that to be the living, breathing, this is what's going on right now.
Right. So obviously, for that specific example, Perry already put out her personal review on Collider Video. But when it came to Movie Review Talk, I guess I was just curious if, and you're right, you make a great point. I don't have a problem with it at all. I was just curious if they would actually mention Jurassic World this week or wait until the 22nd. But not that there's plenty to talk about this week with Ocean's 8, Hereditary, and Hotel Artemis. So yeah.
Wait. Let me tell you where Star Wars fans are awesome and are amazing. We got our second live Schmoedown showing. Probably the match that I was looking forward to the most, this triple threat. I thought that they have improved already upon the first one in terms of things that they were doing. It just seemed like it seemed like things ran a lot more smooth. I'm so happy, so grateful that this is working and that this is successful. And congratulations to every single person involved with it, because I just thought it was amazing and awesome.
And especially when you hear, like Schnepp was talking about on Movie Talk, Schnepp was talking about being behind the scenes, the people that were not involved in that particular match but are overall involved with Collider and the Schmoedown, even their heads are even turning at this idea. And again, we talked about the energy that this thing brings. Everybody's excited by this, and I agree that it was it was just a little bit more. It was more concise, but in the good way. Concise in the sense that they didn't miss a step. The fact that it was just constantly moving. They had been here before, and yeah, I think everybody knew to bring their A game as well. Joseph Scrimshaw and Alex Damon. I thought, even though he's not a character in the Schmoedown in the way that Ken and Scrimshaw is now, but he still did a good job for what it was. And we still welcome his identity as well. So I just kind of thought it was firing on all cylinders. Well, because you started out with a compliment, so unfortunately I have to go positive to a negative. I thought the audio was still just totally rough. And it was insanely hard to listen on computer speakers because it would spike so horribly. But other than that, I thought that the actual showing of it and the actual production of it was really, really good. And I can't wait to see Friday's show as well. But
yeah, well, what you're speaking, I didn't experience what you had mentioned this to me off air. I didn't experience that. I watched it on a television. That's more of like a mixing thing, like a mixing live, which, listen, let's be honest, it's a difficult task to manage all of those microphones going on, especially when you're balancing that with the audience. However, yeah, I think just in general, if there's one thing that just needs like an overall, and you could even talk about this with like the echo inside the studio, I think overall probably the biggest improvement that needs to happen at Collider is just the audio stuff, just across the board. Let me throw out one little.
I wasn't talking about the live audio.
No, I know.
I was talking about the fact that it didn't seem mixed or edited at all.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Just in general,
yeah.
Every like across the board audio is just something that just needs to improve in Collider.
If you're lost, it goes back to the point that I've made before about some of these podcasts. The fact that it seems like the audio is just ripped from the YouTube channel and then uploaded. And some issues, I don't know if you've listened, but some issues I've had in the past, like listening to an episode of Heroes, if you're watching it on TV, you don't notice it as much. It's a little bit more subtle because your room is, enveloping all of the sound. It's a little bit harder to differentiate. But when that audio becomes a podcast and you have it directly in your ears, and if Coy Jandreau is louder than Schnepp and you turn it down because he's too loud, anytime that it goes to Schnepp, you're not even going to be able to hear him because you've already turned it down so much. So that's the issue that I was struggling with. Whereas sometimes on the Schmoedown, they'd be screaming at me, and it didn't seem like any of that was properly leveled. And so that becomes a problem. That was, again, me watching it on my computer speakers. I had to stop it and turn it on my TV to get rid of that problem. But anyway, go ahead with your point. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that I know we're early in Schmoedown Live, and it's got a lot of room to grow, which is really exciting, but I long for the days of a quote-unquote pay-per-view style match. Can you imagine the energy in a live scenario for a free-for-all? I just think that, especially that match specifically, would just be so much fun to watch with a crowd.
Well, they announced another one.
Right.
They announced in the first week of September. It's again at the El Portal. A lot of people, especially people that I follow, whether they're Schmoedown pundits or just people in Schmoeville that I follow, a lot of people fly out to these things, and so people are going to them. They had a sold out crowd last week, and so that's awesome. And you're right. Something like a free-for-all would be amazing to see. They also announced the Collider Collision as well, so that's happening a month and a week from now. So we saw the graphics package from Brian Ward, and it looked really good, and I'm excited yet for another Schmoedown event. So I wanted to get to Schnepp, and then we can talk about the Nightmares Hero crossover, and I think that about does it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Just because we're running close to an hour and a half here. We'll be there probably when we're done. But so Schnepp announced today on Movie Talk that this was going to be his last time on Movie Talk for a while. That he was still going to host Heroes, and I was sad by the announcement for a couple of reasons. One, it kind of just felt random. I didn't have any. There was no preparation for it. Like it's like, by the way, I'm never coming back here again. There was an element of that, but at the same time, when he wrapped it all up, he like had it in a nice little bow. He was just kind of like, yeah, I'm still gonna be on Heroes, and maybe I'll come in and out, and blah 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 blah. But then he took to his Insta, and I felt good about it, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I understand. He's probably gonna do other things. Then he went to Instagram and posted a picture of his first appearance and a picture of today, I guess. And he said a little bit more about it, and his Instagram post made it seem slightly different than how it was laid out on Movie Talk. So I was encouraged at the end of Movie Talk, and then I was then discouraged again. I don't know if that's on me or not, but it just felt more finite when you went to his Instagram. He basically, it felt like he was actually never going to be on Movie Talk again. Heroes, I think he snuck in that Heroes was just moving to Mondays. It's not going to be did I read that incorrectly? I thought he mentioned that there wasn't going to be a Wednesday show anymore. Is that right?
I honestly didn't pick up on that.
Let me pull this back up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't really pick up on that. I think it did come a little bit unexpected. I think we got word a while ago that they were trying to go to a more scheduled rotation of Movie Talk. It was going to be like Christian and Schnepp on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then I think Roca and Perry on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And they just like Christian has just been pretty spotty when he's been on Movie Talk, which obviously it's pretty much due to just how quickly he can get into the studio. Understandable.
It's because Fernandez hasn't been in the office lately.
That's fair. Yeah. So it was sort of abrupt. I thought I could have misread this, but it seemed like he mentioned that he was going to be doing a new show. That I don't know if that's a new show for Collider or just a new show just in general, but it seemed to me like there was some inclusion of something new.
I'll tell you what. Let me just read his caption on his. Again, it's the picture of his first appearance and today's appearance. So his caption reads, "Hey Sweaties, today Wednesday will be my final Movie Talk appearance. I have loved being a staple member of this team for the past 6 years through all of its incarnations, but the time has come for me to leave so I can spend more time talking about and doing the things I'm most passionate about: comic books, science fiction, horror, cult, and indie films, and other genres I want to focus on. Not to worry though, I'll still be hosting Collider Heroes every Monday with some new surprises coming soon, and you'll be able to watch me on my new shows by following my YouTube channel, Schnepp Zone, and joining me on Patreon. Stay sweaty." So I'm actually glad I read that caption, because I wrote an article a few weeks back. The title read, "Why aren't you watching Legion anymore?" And I put it out in Schmoeville to see what people had to say about it, because again, this was happening when you and I were talking a lot about TV coverage, whereas Legion might not be the best example of a show they should cover. A TV talk show would have talked about Legion and its low viewership. But anyway, point being, Schnepp saw the link in Schmoeville and commented and asked everyone in that post if he should cover Legion and Krypton on Schnepp Zone. He asked everybody if they would watch it, if he covered it. And of course, everybody said yes, but I had just assumed that meant he would maybe work it into Heroes, or maybe just do additional videos for Collider. And I don't know if this Instagram post is connected necessarily, but those are the dots that I've connected. That it has something to do with the fact he's thinking about covering all of this stuff that Collider isn't, but on his own YouTube channel. So I thought that was interesting. And then again, the tidbit, it might have been a typo. He said he's hosting Heroes every Monday, though. And I think that's something that I missed on Movie Talk, so I didn't have that clarification. But how do you read into that?
Well, I think a lot of this goes back to the very first conversation that we had today on this episode, just diversifying your portfolio a little bit. And Jon Schnepp especially for, being an elder statesman in this space, I think he is more than capable of doing a bunch of different things. I mean, he has a career, maybe not so well, yeah, a career doing some filmmaking stuff. He's involved with comic books. He goes to comic book conventions. He read off a laundry list of places he was going to be, which offers income. I've always looked at Jon Schnepp in doing Collider stuff as fulfilling a passion, like his fandom literally bleeding through. It's one of the things that we talk about and cite why Heroes feels so much different, is because it feels like a group of fans sitting around and talking about stuff. And I think that that's what it's been for him. And I think the rest of the stuff was a little bit of something to just sort of lean against. Like, I'm sure the appearances on Movie Talk were a nice constant paycheck to have, and this and that, with changes coming and all of that. I think that maybe he looked at some things and said, well, maybe I can just focus on doing the things that I'm passionate about, which involves Collider Heroes still, and maybe a potential new Collider show, and just going off and doing other things as well. I think it's reading the tea leaves. I think it's reading the writing on the walls. Again, just things that we've already talked about and discussed earlier on in this episode.
Well, when it comes to Collider being in the superhero movie coverage game, I think it's a loss in that sense, whereas like Schnepp may or may not have been able to contribute to some videos. I know that they've moved away from like a Collider crash course type of thing, but I guess I see that Collider in some capacity is losing one of their greatest comic book minds. So in a way, that's a little bit disappointing. But at the same time, like you said, I'm cheerleading the idea that Schnepp just kind of wants to do his own thing. And you did mention he's been mentioning how he's at all of these cons, and now he's got something to actually push. Well, I mean, of course he does like his work on the Slayer comic and things like that. Not that Schnepp isn't a personality, but it's a plus that he can also talk about Schnepp Zone. And he can, if he does a panel, he can have a Schnepp Zone panel, not necessarily something that he's pimping for a Collider. So there's just probably, again, like you said, going back to the first conversation that we had, he's sort of just utilizing his position. Like, I'm still glad he's going to be on Heroes. I would be devastated if he wasn't hosting Heroes. Right. But I think I just like that he's doing what's best for him, but disappointed that he'll be on Collider, because he's just been a staple ever since. He's been a constant since I've been watching Collider. He was one of the first people I ever saw on the channel. So he's been that constant, and it sucks to see him go in that way.
Let me throw out a concept here, something that I picked up on during the solo coverage, and I think we can maybe apply it. I don't know if it's something that they're thinking about, or it's like something that they're moving towards, but something that I can sort of appreciate. This idea of filtering your personalities, and I don't mean filtering what they say, I mean filtering them down to one specific location, especially your experts on specific subjects. Like, obviously Jon Schnepp is a comic book freak, a nerd, all-knowing, all-knowledgeable, and I think the same thing about Christian when it comes to Star Wars. We've talked a lot about the repetitive nature of different takes and perspectives, especially when you have a big news story and it's covered in a news article, it's covered on Movie Talk, and then if it's like Star Wars or comic book stuff, they cover it again. How valuable those expert opinions are is something that I really looked for when the solo stuff was going on, and Christian just like wasn't on a lot of Collider stuff. So I was looking for wherever his first take was going to be. I think there's something to be said about that. Like, will more people tune in to Heroes if they're not getting Jon Schnepp on Movie Talk all the time? Will more people tune into Jedi Council for Christian Star Wars take if they're not getting it across other platforms? I think there's something to be said about that. And I think it's something that if they're moving in that direction, it would make a lot of sense.
If Schnepp wasn't hosting Heroes, who do you want to take over? Who's the first person you think of?
Well, I think John Roca's been lobbying a little bit for just how knowledgeable he is on his comic book stuff. I'll be completely honest. Before he was on a lot of Collider stuff, I didn't know he was as knowledgeable about comic book stuff that he is. I mean, he references a lot of actual like comic book series and stuff and artists and this and that. And it's actually surprised me. I don't know if that's something that he's brushed up on since joining Collider, if that's something he's always had, but I didn't realize that was the case. I mean, I think there's more than enough people, and maybe not with, maybe that don't have as diverse and widespread and wide spanning knowledge of comic books that Jon Schnepp does, but I think somebody like a Jason Inman would do a fantastic job at that, or even a co thing with Jason Inman and Ashley. I think they would both be fantastic at doing something like that. But obviously, I don't want Schnepp to go anywhere.
Wrong. You missed the one most obvious choice for the show.
Emergency Awesome.
Amy Dallin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Amy Dallin, without a doubt. I mean, for one, she works at a comic book shop. She's insanely knowledgeable. It's funny how there are so many conversations on Heroes where Amy is informing Schnepp of things that he didn't know about. That happens quite a bit. I think Amy is the easy go-to choice for that, and I'm a massive fan of Robert Meyer Burnett. I don't want him to go anywhere. I just think I don't see Robert Meyer Burnett as a host. That might be on me. I think he's just an amazing contributor. But if Amy was hosting that show, I think it would. Again, this is just conjecture. It doesn't actually matter because Schnepp isn't going anywhere. But there's that for you. Free opinions. Mark Fernandez. The last thing I want to talk about. Have you seen any of the Heroes Nightmares crossover?
I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it. Really interesting thing, I think. A really interesting concept. Be honest. I'm going to be completely honest here. Okay? Raw thing. In my opinion, I'm sorry, there still is no reason for there not to be some sort of Nightmares podcast. It just doesn't make sense. I like and I support and I applaud this crossover thing. I think it makes... We know people who are massive diehard fans. Our friend Luke Jaggers is... I don't think he's watched Colliders since Nightmares went off air.
That honestly might be the truth.
But I think it's cool and I support it and that's great. But and especially it's a good time. I know it's especially good to do it like every once in a while to sort of get all the horror stuff out in the open and all your thoughts and opinions. But there just needs to be a podcast about this. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve to be on video, but you could still be servicing this fan base by doing a podcast as well.
I haven't listened to the show. I don't listen to the show. I'm only vocally saying this to trigger Christian to giving me information about it. I have to know, is Body Slam not ready to be its own show? Like, I just feel like it makes it... As you were talking and you mentioned Nightmares being a podcast, I immediately went to... And I don't want to see it on Factory. Like, I want it to be its own thing. Obviously, there's more of a conversation behind that. But then I started thinking about Body Slam. And just the impression that I get... The fact that it's just a running thing, it's operating on all cylinders as far as I know. You have Roka's involvement. Everything is going for that show. What in the hell is stopping it from being its own feed? I just don't get it. So, there you go, Christian.
Or, I mean, just in general, like, listen, okay? It's a big platform to build something off of. I'm not even talking about the... Okay. In my opinion, Collider Factory is the most underutilized thing that Collider has right now. It exists of a show that already exists or existed that they've ported over to it, which is doing great apparently. It's Schmoedown stuff, which is cool. It's Schmoedown Rundown, which is cool. And Body Slam is the only brand new thing that exists on that feed that didn't exist prior to it. It feels like it needs to be, and I'm not pointing a finger at anybody at Collider. Like, there are people in the space like all these people, these freelancers that are out of work and this and that, they should be coming up with podcasts right now, pitching it to Christian Harloff to get on the air. Maybe it doesn't pay. I don't know. Whatever the case may be. But you can build your audience. You can start there. Like, people need to be putting fucking podcasts on Collider Factory. The factory's not turning out enough stuff. The factory would have been closed down by now. Get some shit on the factory. Let's go.
Jay, I'm glad you brought it up because I've got 6 ideas for podcasts.
You're denied. You're denied. You don't have any more room. You don't have any more time. We got to get more sight and sound stuff out.
You're the after show guys.
That's right. I will be pitching my Collider Factory show before the year's end, though.
Anyway, the only thing that I'll say about the Heroes Nightmares crossover, it's exactly what you... I'm talking to you mainly, just because you haven't seen it. It's exactly what you think it is. It's just the panelists there together, and it's a show where they include horror in an episode of Heroes. And I made sure to share the link on Twitter, and I shared the link in Schmoeville, and I made it very clear. Hopefully a lot of people see it. If you are someone who was affected by it sounds like a PSA. If you are someone who was affected by the cancellation of Collider Nightmares, it doesn't have to end here. You can voice your opinion by watching that show, thumbs upping it, commenting, and sharing the shit out of it. And make sure it's seismic, because people still to this day talk about the fact that they canceled Collider Nightmares. And that show wasn't for me. Riley famously had a problem with me not covering it on After Schmo. But that's not to say that it doesn't deserve another chance. Like you said, it could be in podcast form. Oh, here's another... Well, I'll get to that in just a second. If you are a Nightmares fan, make sure that you do something about it, because they just gave you a mashup episode. Let Collider know you miss it, and prove to them that there is an audience. And maybe that's what gets the podcast off the ground. So there's that. When it comes to eventually moving Body Slam off of off of Collider Factory, I feel like there has to be some kind of transitional period where like they're promoting that it's getting its own feed, but they let it transition in the sense like maybe there's 2 or 3 weeks where they upload episodes where they are promoting the new feed. That way they already get new subscribers, and then there could be like 1 or 2 weeks where they publish duplicate episodes, and then eventually they're off and running on their own solo feed. Is that how you imagine that going, or is it enough to just say, hey, we're not doing it here on Collider Factory anymore, go over here? But I just feel like there's not enough promotion at Collider, so I feel like that kind of idea would benefit them the most.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just have always foreseen it as like you do your podcast, you put it up there, you see how it goes, you evaluate the numbers, and then if it warrants moving to its own feed, you make the announcement on this specific date. Maybe you do a couple copycat episodes where they're on 2 separate feed, or, it's a dual feed sort of situation. But on the last one, it's like, you're only going to listen to, 15 minutes of this podcast. But after that, if you want to hear the full episode, you go over here. I don't know. There's just so many ways to actually do something like that. Yeah, it just involves informing the audience. There are times, though, I'll be completely honest, there are times when I forget about Collider Body Slam. It's not because I'm obviously not like a diehard wrestling fan, but like, does the show have, I think it has like an identity to it in terms of branding. Like, I think Brian Ward did artwork.
Yes.
But like, it kind of just exists, right? Like, it kind of just exists on my podcast feed. We've heard people talk about this. There are people, and I get this, you and I have had so many conversations about this when it comes to sight and sound, about just how things are particularly labeled. We've had people say to us they've missed Afterthoughts because they don't really see it in their feed just because of the way it's labeled. The Afterthoughts name is at the end as opposed to the beginning. We could debate that all day. but that's not the place for this. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, I hesitate to say this, but it's purely out of curiosity. Like, I don't know if Body Slam is something that they think about wanting to grow. Like, if the people who are on, I'm sure I guess Aaron Turner is still involved with it. I'm sure it's something he's probably passionate about, but like, I don't know if that's something that's a priority. I just don't know. I'm completely ignorant to the fact. But it seems like, is it even distributed on YouTube? Like,
No.
like, do they need to start their own YouTube channel? Do they need to start their own Twitter account? Like, if you're getting 30,000 downloads, I know we're saying this, but we have a whole other thing. But if you're getting like 30,000 downloads for your podcast, you probably need a Instagram profile, a Twitter profile. Like, I would be trying to communicate with my fans.
So I'm thinking about when we started Sight and Sound. One of the very first things that we did was look at blogs that weren't creating content, and we pitched what we were doing to them. I feel like there's got to be some kind of wrestling blog, or in the way that Jedi Council is featured on Star Wars Newsnet as a post, as a show. I feel like you could at least get somebody on board to hosting Body Slam. Because, I mean, going back to the conversation we had, why don't Collider.com articles include particular podcasts, like SoundCloud files of podcasts, if you will? It's like, I feel like you could find some place looking for a wrestling podcast like that. Because, I mean, they do, I don't know a whole lot about wrestling, but they literally cover every single faction in wrestling, as far as I know, like NXT and WWE and all kinds of stuff. So they do a little bit of everything on that podcast, as far as I know. So I don't know, even something like that, something so minimal, I feel like could be done. And there's, I don't know. Maybe more on that next week. We figure out how we can grow the Collider Factory shows.
Or just how to make a new podcast on Collider successful. Like, listen, if this was the only show we did, like if we didn't have Sight and Sound stuff going on as well and building our own brand outside of this, we would probably put just as much effort, if not more effort, not effort, effort's not the right word, more energy into this. Like, we would probably be seeking out more guests. We would probably be putting out maybe even more episodes. Like, I was just thinking about this while you were talking about, like, how great would it be, how fun would it be, and how fun for our audience would it be if every time they did movie talk, we had a YouTube channel where we then did like a quote unquote movie talk reaction, and we played that game that you were talking about where we actually awarded points. And I mean, we don't have time for that, but I'm just saying these are the types of ideas that I think if this was your only gig to grow something like this, that you could be investing in. And I mean, the opportunity's there, the potential's there. People just have to go get it.
What a great idea.
Yeah, I know. I'm full of great ideas.
Jay, that's it for me. Where can the kids find you online? That was a total Mark Ellis line. I'm sorry I stole that. Jay, where can the people find you on the interwebs? No, that's overused as well. Jay, just tell them some things.
You can find me at Jaye Williams, J to the A to the Y to the E on Twitter and Instagram. It's the same for both. Over on Sight and Sound, we got you covered. All things music, movies, and television. We're recapping Legion, even though we're not quite enjoying the show. We're wrapping that up. I do a music show every single Friday, but I am taking some time off. Our good buddy Brando, who we spoke about earlier, he will be taking over that for me for a while. I'm actually going out to California in July, so we'll see what happens there. I will be doing a ton of music coverage on our YouTube channel. I will be reviewing albums. I will be just talking about the relevance of hip-hop, which it's extremely relevant. Might even inform some people in Burbank. You never know. Anyways, Ryan, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell. Like I said before, there's an episode, I call it Movie Bucket List, and Ken Knapsack was my guest. If you go to the Sight and Sound podcast feed or YouTube channel, you can hear the 10 movies that Ken Knapsack prescribes to every film fan. Frank Lucatuardo says about Sight and Sound, you guys have a rational, real-world approach to movie stuff, which I can appreciate. So if you're missing out on Sight and Sound, There are links in the description below. You can check out that conversation we had about Solo, and maybe it's refreshing because there's a lot of shit going down, and I don't like it. But there's that for you. We appreciate your time. We love you. We'll see you next week.